Hello, live from London at Stellar Meridian, 800 attendees coming in from all over the world for this 3-day annual conference that brings together developers, founders, entrepreneurs, leaders from traditional and decentralized finance, policymakers, and so much more to share, learn, build, and engage on the theme of transformation. I'm CoinDesk anchor Christine Lee, and Joining me is my colleague, Sam Ewan, Head of Innovation. Sam, we're on day 2 of the conference. How's it going?
I'm feeling great. I thought yesterday was a fantastic day.
What were some of the standouts to you?
The standouts for me were a couple of different things. On the one hand, I think, when you come to Meridian, you're focused very much on disbursements, payments. How do you bring funds to the people who need it most? Mm-hmm. And those who really have not enjoyed their lives with sophisticated financial tooling. And so when we had folks like Alex from MoneyGram, when we have John from Stripe, we have people who are committed in big fintech to bringing the blockchain, and especially around stablecoins, to those who can really benefit from those, much more than you and I can, frankly. I think that there's something that is really magical about those stories, and I really like hearing that there is a commitment to continuing to bring that. I also will say, I think both you and I dipped into Idris Elba's his session.
Yep.
And
award-winning
actor, very handsome man, a wonderful voice. Tall, dreamy, all of the things. But they launched yesterday. He launched what was called the Acuna wallet. Mm-hmm. And Christine, I know you were, I think, on maternity last year. We were here in Spain for Meridian last year. We got the pleasure of speaking with Idris. And one of the things he had said on stage that we actually went pretty deep into was the idea that the creator economy in areas of Africa cannot get paid because the traditional banking system won't give them credentials. Mm-hmm. Right? They won't allow them to have bank accounts. So therefore, if you're a YouTube star, you can't get money out. And this was a challenge that Danelle on stage said, well, let's help you solve that. Mm-hmm. And
the Acuna wallet makes great strides in doing that in Ghana.
Yeah, here we are a year later, and they launched the Acuna wallet, which is trying to do just that. Yeah. So that was a big moment for me. What for you stood out?
Well, I mean, the Idris creator panel was interesting. As you mentioned, there were creators there, and they were with an iPhone on the beach making incredible videos on par with folks with big production companies. And as you said, they couldn't get any money when Apple wanted to offer them a sizable sum. And with the Acuna wallet, that gives them an opportunity in Ghana, at least, to have someone send them digitally what they're owed in terms of their talents and such. So that was interesting. And I guess the overall theme here is connecting underserved and unbanked communities around the world to the financial system. And there was that buzzword.
Right, the global majority.
Global majority, yes. 52% that will be on the rails of the financial system. So I suppose that goes as well.
Well, Christine, let me ask you one thing, though, because I think the other thing that was really interesting to me is we met with Rick from Decaf, right? And they have this a wallet project. This wallet project was really started as a decentralized wallet, riding on Stellar and some other chains. But when he mentioned the fact that in this town in Colombia that they made this film about, that they have people now who are just sending money back and forth, like stable coins back and forth to each other, where they're not even taking the money out anymore.
Yeah.
They're just using the CBDC, really USDC, as its own currency, as one to exchange back and forth. That is something that I think really just makes me think about the idea that crypto as a dynamic digital currency for the internet age is such a big unlock for our industry. If we can get people to understand that's maybe the utility we really were looking for.
Yep. And Stripe had mentioned that with us as well in terms of stablecoins being really the killer app in crypto, in terms of when you have that earning power in digital currencies, you naturally start using them. And then when they're in the hands of folks in a very simple and intuitive way that gets rid of the confusion over private keys and, I guess, janky wallets that maybe not everyone can personally and manually program, but when they are on apps and on smartphones that are easily accessible, it's, your grandmother can use it, then that's really when people start using digital currencies. And once you're earning it and it gets into circulation, then that's the entry point.
That's why we're all doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we are also, I understand we have a couple of guests joining us from that are also talking about underserved and unbanked communities. And it's been about 2.5 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. When it comes to affording life, Ukrainians juggle limited cash withdrawals, suspended currency markets, and a steep devaluation of their national currency, the hryvnia. And our next guests offer a potential solution to give financial stability back into the hands of Ukrainians, I understand.
All right, well, let's hit a break. We'll get them on set, and we'll start having that conversation.
Excellent.
This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block.
All right, it's been 2.5 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. When it comes to affording life, Ukrainians juggle limited cash withdrawals, suspended currency markets, and a steep devaluation of the national currency, the Ukrainian hryvnia. But our next guests offer a potential solution to give financial stability back into the hands of Ukrainians. Joining us to discuss is Stellar Development Foundation Director of Product, Paul Wong, as well as Ihor Hulov, Head of Product at Payment Processor Group, DCM. Hello. Welcome, Paul and Ihor. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So I understand you have an announcement this morning.
Yeah, basically what we did for last couple of years, and especially we were boosted by war, which happened unfortunately. We, together with Stellar, we introducing the transparent network, the first Ukrainian network with instant and transparent payments for Ukrainian and Ukrainian businesses. Basically, what's the most important that by leveraging the Stellar technology, all payments are not only fast but also secure and fully traceable, which nowadays is super important for public and donor-funded projects.
Well, I see that the implementation of the transport network comes at a very crucial time in Ukraine. The country is projected to receive approximately $500 billion in reconstruction funding. Is that all through crypto?
No, this is one of the groundbreaking things that's happening right now in the payment space, which is we're able to provide transparency, traceability, and auditability of payments in real time. And this is particularly important for Ukraine, where they're expected to receive $500 billion worth of reconstruction aid payments. Not all of it will be on the blockchain, but we're hoping that much of it will be. And part of the reason why is 20 to 40% of development aid actually gets lost to misconduct, fraud, malfeasance. You name it, it probably happens in development aid. So the more that we're able to move payments to the blockchain to provide that transparency and traceability and auditability, the more funds will get to the Ukrainian people at the end of the day.
And will that be through stablecoins mainly? The crypto part, at least?
Not right now. The way that DCM or the way that TPN works is basically banks sort of send messages to each other on the blockchain, and funds are moved at the various banks with end-of-day settlement at the central bank.
Right. because when I was reading the announcement, it seemed like this was the first really union of banks coming together to also support a blockchain project, which seemed pretty interesting to me. But just to be clear, it's not a CBDC. It's not focused on utilizing a USDC. It's really about an agreement that the blockchain is validating. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Not yet, I would say.
Yes.
And is what we bring new to the Ukrainian market, modernizing financial landscape. It's really, as you mentioned, it's a consortium of the bank, where not all of them now, 11 out of 33, but which is also a big share, that we agreed on the new rules of playing. That this consortium set up the rule and follow by themselves. And we just help them with technology, with then recording all the transactions in the blockchain, which brings full traceability. But what's really important that it's really first time when banks combined create a union consortium and play the same rules without any, let's say, supervisor or some single payment processor or provider.
The real innovation here is that this is the first instant payment system on a public blockchain, and that is huge. So you can imagine the solution as being an RTP on the blockchain. And it's better than RTP on the blockchain in the sense that it leverages global infrastructure, which is the Stellar blockchain network. It again allows for transparency and traceability of payments, which is particularly important in the context of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And Igor, I mean, this war's been going on now for a while. I assume that there's opportunities, more and more opportunities for people to help in different ways. As we know, there's a lot of aid coming in. Stellar Aid Assist, I also know, was one of the early entrants into this and helping Ukraine get funds in. But what do you think is needed most in the financial systems within Ukraine at the moment?
Basically, what we need, it's just clear rules. It's just traceability of payments, of incomes. You know, that Ukraine is a huge market overall. It's 30+ million people, and we had potential for different use cases, whether it's P2P, it's e-commerce payment, and of course, it's donor public funds, which, as you mentioned, has a huge potential. So to provide potential donors, potential investors the opportunity to have a payment rails and system which trace the income, the investments, confidently navigate the financial commitments to Ukraine. That's what we basically do building. It's infrastructure, it's ecosystem, and it's spirit of trust between all participants.
If I may add another dimension, what TPN really provides is innovation and competition. Today, there is no instant payment system in Ukraine. By offering an instant payment system in Ukraine, one of the things that we're able to do for the local banking sector is create a level playing field. And we're doing that by basically allowing small and mid-sized banks a larger payments network. Today, the banking system in Ukraine is dominated by one bank that controls or owns 60% of deposits. And because there's one bank that dominates the system, you really don't see innovation or efficiency coming out of the banking system. On the merchant front, TPN will lower the cost of payments. And we expect the merchants to pass on those cost savings to their consumers. We already know this based on conversations with merchants that expect to give discounts and rebates, reward programs to its customers if they pay through TPN. And then on the consumer level, what we can expect is improved services, innovation, efficiency, and consumers will also be able to conduct peer-to-peer transactions for free, which currently doesn't exist today between banks. So if you're a bank at one customer and I'm a bank at another a customer at another bank, we are not actually able to make peer-to-peer payments for free today in Ukraine. This solution offers peer-to-peer payments for free if you're banking at one of the partner banks.
Interesting. And this is a consortium of banks in Ukraine, or does it encompass a wider region?
No, it is a consortium governed by banks, Ukrainian National Association, which basically ordered us this solution, and we built. So it's a consortium of national Ukrainian banks, National Association of Ukrainian Banks, and technology provider, which is DSM, built on Stellar.
Okay. Well, congratulations. Yeah.
Paul, how does an idea like this come to life within Stellar? Ihor comes to you and says, we have a need, and then you guys say, we're on it. Like what's the process of that?
So this project really started from Stellar's relationship with the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian banks. It started in 2021 with a pilot to experiment with e-money. That pilot concluded in early 2023, where the report basically said blockchain is great for payments. As a result of that report, we sort of transitioned to developing an instant payment system on a blockchain. The government is incredibly innovative. It moves incredibly progressive. But we also know that government projects tend to move a little bit slower than private sector projects. So one of the things that we did is got the banks together and got them to collaborate on developing a private sector solution for instant payments on Ukraine. And the solution is coming, it's live today. A public introduction will be done next month. So within a span of a year, we've been able to build an instant payment system relatively quickly, thanks to DCM and its partners.
Ihor, do you see the transparent network only residing within Ukraine, or is the goal at some point to open it out to other countries?
No, obviously, by building the infrastructure in Ukraine, we see potential to extend this on other markets, especially countries where the big demand for public donor funds, countries where where UNHCR, organization which provides any kind of donations, are operating. So by bringing good solution, instant payments and traceability, we are ready to enter other markets where we may be helpful for the people.
I think what we see is that a lot of countries are exploring this notion of having or creating a central bank digital currency. And in most parts of the world, what folks need is an instant payment system. Whether that instant payment comes through a public blockchain or whether it comes through a private solution managed and operated by the central bank, I don't think most people really care. What people care about is the speed of payments, and this is what the solution offers. And as Ihor noted, this solution is particularly relevant to jurisdictions where transparency, traceability, and auditability of funds matter. And presumably, arguably, that's in many parts of the world. I think when we look across the global payments landscape, we see that a lot of countries are missing an instant payment system. This is where I think a public blockchain comes in, where we can go into a country and build it very quickly. And we can build it very quickly with the collaboration of the private banks in that country.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see that 98% of countries with are looking to at least explore a CBDC. I wonder, where is that effort in your view in terms of the development and in offering a retail CBDC?
I think when I look at various CBDC projects around the world, there haven't been any that have been particularly successful. Even the most successful one, which is arguably in China, has not seen great adoption. I think what we do see is rapid adoption of instant payment systems around the world, like in India, like in Brazil. And that speaks volumes to what people are looking for. It also speaks to maybe, it speaks volumes to what people are looking for, which is people want speed of transaction. They want to make sure it's there. Do they care who owns the system? I'm not so sure. As long as it works, people are happy. One of the things that is unique about blockchain is the robustness and resiliency of global infrastructure, public global infrastructure. Stellar has been operational for 10 years, and its availability rate is almost close to 100%. It's something like 99.999%, which is incredible for a payment system.
Okay, I just want to make a quick correction of myself. I said 98% of countries are considering exploring a CBDC. It's 134 countries representing 98% of the global GDP. But I wanted to ask you about privacy, because you mentioned this allows for folks to audit the system for mismanagement, which is great. But on the flip side, does it also encroach upon privacy concerns and, taking our data. I guess the fear here was that, our balances could potentially be wiped out or paused or frozen, and that could significantly impact financial freedom.
Well, what's important to understand is that DSM operates as interoperability informational layer, but what we do, we combine our solution with encryption and blockchain technology, where only limited anonymized data is recorded and able to be tracked. So only those organization or participating bank who has direct access to DSM solutions, they can trace, then can be sure that all money went directly to the intended receivers, and no worries about public, let's say, view of personal data. We are fully compliant with GDPR, with local regulation, so our transactions absolutely secure and legitimate to local legislation and overall.
Mm-hmm.
I would add that we have different systems for different things. So if you really want privacy, you might want to pay in cash. But even with cash payments, I would argue that we have so many video camera systems that they can probably trace who submitted the $10, right? Who paid the $10? Because if you review the video records, you can probably say, hey, if that person's the one that gave me the counterfeit 100. So nothing is really that private or anonymous. But we have different solutions for different things. And I think this solution was really created to allow donors to see where their payments are at any point in time. We have built ancillary systems to help with tracking and tracing payments. So, for example, if the World Bank decides that it wants to send $10 million to Ukraine to build a road, and they include a project code, and that project code is attached to all of the subsequent payments related to that particular project, the World Bank will be able to see that $5 million went to an engineering firm, $4 million went to a concrete company, and $1 million went to salaries, right? So that's the type of transparency that I think the solution offers. So many payments are made today on the blockchain that it's incredibly hard to look for information. So it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Can you do it? Yes, but the more information you have, the more that we can trace on the public blockchain. So unless you're looking for something specific, I'm less concerned about the privacy point because, again, we're processing millions of transactions every day on the blockchain. Good luck trying to find my payment per se.
So, Ihor, sounds great. Congratulations on the success you've had so far. At this moment, what are the biggest challenges that you see ahead of you?
Thanks, first of all, and I hope that year after, we will come with much more success with bigger use cases, with bigger amounts of banks. And basically, the biggest challenge is to convince banks, especially big ones, to join this consortium to play the same rules, which basically they have privilege to set before their own. So we are really building the system and ecosystem of trust, transparency, and the single rules for everyone on Ukrainian market. That's the biggest challenge.
Okay. Bringing it back to the Stellar Meridian conference, what are you looking forward to on day 2? I imagine you're doing your own talks as well. But what have you seen and what are you looking forward to?
For me, it's hearing about all the innovation that is going on in the ecosystem, and there's a lot going on. Ihor described one innovation which I think is incredibly groundbreaking for me, which is, again, it's the first instant payment system on a public blockchain. The second is really interoperability. So one of the things that I'm excited to talk about today is our interoperability with Hyperledger and other chains. The reason why that's important is because we've now connected closed private blockchains to a public blockchain. And that matters because we're able to extend what private blockchains can do using public blockchains. I think one of the things that you will hear today is all the exciting stuff going on with wallets. We're making wallets a lot easier to use. We're getting rid of the complexity. We've gotten rid of things like recovery keys and all that craziness, and we're making it much easier to make payments on the Stellar network.
All right. Well, Thank you so much, Paul and Ihor. Thanks for joining us. I'm excited for your talks and also the various ecosystem players. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. That was Stellar Development Foundation Director of Product, Paul Wong, and DCM Head of Product, Ihor Holub. Next up, we've got credit powerhouse MasterCard. They're unveiling their MasterCard Crypto Credential, which uses their global network to offer secure and compliant credentialing solutions for crypto wallet providers, including Coins.ph, Mercado Bitcoin, and WireX. Earlier, we had a chance to talk to Wei Zhou. He's the CEO of Philippines crypto exchange Coins.ph. I asked him how this partnership is a game changer. Tell us a bit about what the MasterCard Crypto Credential Network is all about, and what's the problem and how is this the solution?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger use cases that we've seen for crypto in the Philippines specifically has been on the remittance side. Philippines, as some of you know, is the fourth largest remittance intaking country in the world, with about $40 billion coming into the country by the 15 plus million Filipinos that work globally. And the traditional financial ecosystem have generally been undervalued or not really servicing this group of people that well, with both sort of exorbitant fees in the 5 to 6% range, as well as basically not really providing additional financial services on top of and then given that most of them work in one country, but then where they need financial services is actually in the home country. So what we've sort of are working with MasterCard on through their crypto credential program is to tap into sort of their network and to be able to provide onshore financial services in the Philippines. For Coins, we're the first licensed or one of the earliest licensed cryptocurrency exchanges in the Philippines. We have about 4 million registered users, and then we've been sort of the pioneer in the Philippines in terms of enabling remittance through crypto rails. In addition to MasterCard, we also work with Stellar to support USDC sort of remittance on chain to the Philippines. So through this additional crypto credential program with MasterCard, it basically offers, I think, MasterCard users globally, access points in the Philippines.
Is this with any MasterCard or it's a special card?
So the thing is right now, I think outside of sort of the traditional card program, I think MasterCard is actually building this thing up to be able to enable, I think, MasterCard services for users. You don't actually have to be a MasterCard holder to be able to tap into this network.
So, wait, I'm trying to understand exactly what's going on, right? Credentialing sounds like an opportunity to create more security and sort of more of a knowledge base that the transactions happening or the people that are involved are who they say they are.
Yeah.
So how is that helping Coins?
Yeah. So for it helps us, I think, is the way sort of two fronts. The credential aspects of it is that given that we're a licensed, our license comes from central bank, so we actually have to perform KYC and AML on all of our users and then all of the transactions. So, and what MasterCard is trying to do is basically trying to build up a network of similar businesses in different regions such that they can enable a new way that money can flow, right? Currently, money flows through traditional fiat rails, right? How money is going to flow in the future? Is that going to flow on chain, right? In this situation on Stellar, right? But the thing is that as regulated financial institutions in different parts of the world talk to each other, they have to ensure that this guy that I'm servicing, say in the Philippines, isn't going to trigger any, AML rules or isn't going to trigger any regulatory issues, right? So that's, I think, that's why they're building up this crypto credential such that they are working with basically trusted parties that basically can then onboard users to basically use this new chain.
And
Okay.
Yep.
you talk about fees upwards of 5%. So what does this do in terms of reducing those costs?
Yeah. So outside of sort of what we're working on MasterCard, what we're currently working on with Stella is there's a couple of different remittance vendors that like MoneyGram, who I think is speaking here, right? I think for them, they have they currently have service some business in the Philippines, but but what they're trying to do is basically swapping out what they're using the banking system to basically using USDC specifically, right, on Stellar Network. So with that, for example, we're enabling something in the UAE such that a corresponding exchange in the UAE called Index, we're going to turn on Stellar USDC on both sides, such that users then can basically onboard into USDC legally through Index in the UAE, and then offboard the USDC legally here in the Philippines. I mean, the fees on that are basically whatever you pay for cost of trading, which is like 10 bips, 20 bips, right? And then whatever the blockchain transaction fees are. So it's basically less than 1%. So I think there's significant savings, but I think it's not just about the cost aspects of it, but it's also about the speed. Right. A lot of times, it'll take maybe 1 day or 2 days. The proverbial check is in the mail, but this one's pretty much instant. Right. So, so I think what it will enable is, what the goal that we're trying to achieve, I think, as an industry, but also Coins more specifically for our users, is for them to be able to enjoy what I call T plus 0 plus 0.
So what do you, I mean, I would love to know more about your users. What are you seeing happening behaviorally in the Philippines that this helps to solve the problem for? But also in general, is crypto just growing as an opportunity for users in the Philippines?
Yeah. So in addition to sort of like receiving sort of remittance from outside of the Philippines, one big use case is actually blank to earn. If you remember a couple of years ago, there was a hugely popular Web3 game called Axie Infinity that, at one point, that had like a couple of million people in the country that was actively on that platform. And they were able to earn, a couple $100s a month, right, from just playing a game. And I think that industry is still alive. It's just that the scale may be smaller and the dollar return is maybe smaller, but that we still have a very active play to earn community in the Philippines. And then, so it does provide, I think, additional economic opportunities or just additional sources of income. Right. And then another opportunity that we're seeing right now is actually more so, I think, on the DePIN space, which is the decentralized physical infrastructure. So we recently listed a token on Coins where it's a mapping software that you can install on your dashboard, right? Whether it's and what's really unique is that the roads that's driven by cars, I think, have maybe been mapped out, but roads that gets driven by motorbikes or mopeds aren't really mapped out. So, and that's sort of maybe a predominantly way where delivery drivers or other types of transportation vehicles. So we basically are working with this DePIN company to install their camera devices on motorbikes to map out the roads better, right? And then the more you map, you can basically swap out for tokens. So you basically like a map to earn kind of a project where can map out the roads in more real time. That's maybe more applicable to the local community or the local geography. So I think some of those opportunities are some of the ones that I'm seeing, and I think we're going to see more of those type of projects where tokens get to be used to organize a group of people to do certain things.
Interesting. So I see with this announcement in particular, so you've got MasterCard on one end, and you've got Coins.ph, Mercado Bitcoin, and WireX. So I guess you guys, and you're doing this on Stellar Rails, but you guys are kind of the crypto intermediary.
Yeah.
In this.
So the way I like to call it is the way to think about it, I think in blockchain terms, is like in the Philippines, think of us as your fiat node. Like we're basically your local fiat node, right? That is, and then typically you need a license, right? Because otherwise, because there's this fiat node, then you can actually not just onboard users, which are either your users or we can basically move our users to use your services, or you can actually onboard your users to use our services, right? But what's interesting is that we are then also connected into basically the financial infrastructure of the Philippines, right? So you can actually, through our fiat node, you can actually basically get money in and out of banks, get money in and out of payment apps, right? And then get money, spend the money there. So I think that's why I think one of the bigger use cases that I'm seeing, and then I would say Mercado Bitcoin, I think, which is one of the larger licensed exchanges in Brazil. Sort of they're like your fiat node in Brazil, right? So as sort of, from blockchain perspective, you'll need to be connected into these different fiat nodes to actually offer, real world services.
Interesting. And your crypto exchange is specifically aimed at the Philippines. And previously, you were CFO at Binance, which obviously is the largest crypto exchange in the world. And you abruptly left. So I'm wondering, like, can you tell us a bit about why you decided to leave and transition since then to create a competing exchange specifically targeting the Philippines?
Yeah, so I joined Binance in the summer of 2018, and I was there for 3+ years. Sort of I'm not like your traditional finance and accounting CFO. I was more of like what I call the growth and strategy CFO. So basically did a lot of work in terms of global expansion, went to like 50+ countries, right? Landing Binance, I think, with a license or with fiat rails in different countries. And then also ran a lot of the M&A. So did, through a combination of build, invest, and buy, a lot of exchanges. I think when I was there, we launched, I think, I helped basically launch about 10+ fiat exchanges in different regions, and then also we added about support of about over 100+ currencies on Binance. Right, I left in the summer of 21, more I think for personal reasons. I think, and then but what I did with Coins is actually. Because it's one of those deals I think that CZ could have looked at. When I checked with him, and do you want to buy it? He's like, no. He's like, do you mind if I buy it? He's like, okay. so I went and bought Coins. And it's like, it's a small country in Southeast Asia. It's like not really. It's not going to hurt your, global ambition, right? So we received regulatory approval in the second quarter of 2022. Right, so I put together a consortium where I basically led the acquisition of Coins from an Indonesian conglomerate that had held it. Right, and then I basically saw it as an opportunity of what we were just talking about. Whereas, like, I feel like these global exchanges are much more what I call they sit in the cloud. Occasionally they'll drop in some paratroopers to hit certain countries or land in certain countries, but to make real change and actually bring a lot of these things that we've been talking about, you actually need to be on the ground. Right, on the ground, and actually be connected with not just the users, but actually with the existing financial rails. Because one thing that I believe in is that, like something that CZ said when I first joined Binance was why I was working on. One of the things that he pitched me was like, 99.999% of the world's money are in fiat, right? And only like a tiny little percentage are in crypto today, right? Like, and the biggest pain point for everyone in the world in terms of accessing crypto, I think, is still sort of that fiat experience. Right, so sort of the value that we want to bring through Coins is to make basically this fiat experience both better, right, but then also to be able to onboard more users, right. But then because you have a lot of product that's being built, I think, in the crypto world, right. But the thing is that most people sort of in the fiat world don't really know about it. Right, and then you can only do that by basically being, on the ground, be able to be connected to their existing banks and payment providers, to be able to bridge that money over.
Wait, though, I have just a philosophical question, which is some of the people we've spoken to here over this today have talked about the idea of kind of hiding crypto as much as possible, right? And that's the way, just making it feel like a financial app. Others are obviously very focused on crypto is a forced change. So where do you sit in the Philippines? Do you think they want to know it's crypto, and does that help? Or is it more just like, let's just make easier financial rails?
I think for me, it's just like, you don't need to dumb it down for someone to use your app, right? You don't need to dumb down your services. Most people will come to your services when you have actually give them something in return, right? I think most users that we talk to in the Philippines or anywhere in the world, they come into crypto because they see financial opportunity, right? Either to speculate in assets that they don't get to speculate in their existing financial whatever, or they come in because they see an opportunity to earn stuff. Right. There's something I'm going to talk about tomorrow is that we had this one user that I've been talking to that was an OFW. So he's a Philippine overseas worker that's been working in Saudi Arabia for 10 years. Right. Not the easiest place to work as a domestic worker. But anyhow, but he joined a community called Turbo. It's one of the meme coins. He joined them as a community lead for them. Right. And he's been actively promoting it. And then I got a message from him from last week. He's like, oh, I didn't know that he was an OFW. I just knew him from this token. Right? It's a token that we're listing. I'm talking about promoting it. And he says, oh, by the way, I'm coming back to the Philippines next week. I was like, cool, let's hang out, let's meet up. He's like, where are you now? He's like, oh, I'm an OFW in Saudi Arabia. I'm returning to the Philippines. I've been working here for 10 years. I'm coming back for good. Because through the work that he's been doing in crypto, now he has saved up enough, earned enough, and saved enough that he's going to come home and work on his project that he has in the Philippines now. So I think it's these kind of stories and opportunities that you have in crypto that you don't have anywhere else in the world.
And would you say in the Philippines it's more crypto friendly as well in terms of government and regulation?
I think like I kind of want to break the world in sort of two places. One was I call it developed countries. I think developed countries in general are more hesitant to sort of just take on crypto, not just through regulation, just in general, right? But developing countries or emerging economies, I would say, are much more open, right? Because you're basically, I compare to like, China, people don't really use PC that much. They're on phones, right? Why? Because they skipped the PC phase, right? People in Africa now aren't really using banks. They go straight to their crypto wallet. Right. It's just like I think it's like it's changing, but things may move faster. I think in the emerging economies and the developing economies, especially on sort of like use cases vis-a-vis the more developed world.
It's interesting you say that because the difference between developed and developing world and how developed countries are maybe a little less or are more hesitant to adopt innovation, it seems, and with your experience at Binance in going out there trying to get the licenses, with that in mind, and CZ having just been released out of jail, I mean, what was your reaction when he pled guilty in the first place? After you had tried to reach out to these countries, work with their regulators, and getting struck back anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think can't really comment too much from a personal perspective, because he's like, still my friend. But just in general, I think like, I think the approach to crypto has sort of like taken a couple of turns, right? If you remember when crypto first started, like I remember when I got into the industry in 2013, when I heard about Bitcoin, I was living in Beijing at that time in 2013, 2014, you can actually buy Bitcoin with RMB, right, with onshore in China, right? In 2015, 2016, like half of the world's Bitcoin were traded on Chinese exchanges in RMB, right? And it wasn't until sort of USDT came about in like 2015, 2016 that most of the trading volume switched from fiat-based trading volume to actually crypto-to-crypto trading volume, right? When Binance launched in 2017, it was purely just a crypto-to-crypto exchange, right? And that's sort of, that cycle, I think, has come to, where we are today, right? I think we're actually coming into a next phase of the cycle where we're actually going to return to actually be more fiat-driven trading of crypto, right? And that's, one very, very clear example of that is basically you have ETFs now, right? You're like that product is a boomer product, right? That's not a, but that's not a developing world emerging economy product, right? But the thing is that has enabled, you can buy crypto products directly with fiat directly in your, security pro account. But that's just for emerging economy. That's for the developing world, right? But for the emerging economies, like people in the Philippines, we got our license in 2015, 16. So people could have been buying Bitcoin directly with peso through coins for like, 7 or 8 years now, right? So, and that's true, I think, for some of our neighboring countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia as well, right? So I think coming back to the point about sort of, my reactions about Binance and CZ, I think they've done a tremendous job. I was there the 3 years I was there. I tell people I've never worked more harder in my life, but we felt like we were on it was a mission-driven company, right, to deliver what CZ called the freedom of money, right, which is like how, and sort of my take on that stance today is that there is freedom of money, but then you also have to do it in a more kosher manner now, right? You can't just sort of, because I think, but the thing is like in 2017, 2018, like people didn't know I don't think anybody knew what the rules of the roads are, right? You're basically going out there basically, carving up the jungle and then paving the roads, right? So, and he paid the price for it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Wei, for joining us. Appreciate your insights. That was Coins.ph CEO Wei Zhou. Coming up, we've got crypto news headlines with CoinDesk Daily and Chart of the Day. You don't want to miss it. Tesla is moving its Bitcoins, and Coinbase intensifies its SEC legal battle. This is CoinDesk Daily. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Tesla, one of the biggest corporate owners of Bitcoin, transferred nearly all of its $760 million worth of Bitcoin to unknown wallets, raising the possibility the car maker is selling. Tesla is the fourth biggest holder of Bitcoin among publicly traded U.S. companies, according to Bitcoin Treasury's data. This is the first time Tesla has moved its Bitcoin in 2 years since selling 75% of its holdings in early 2022 at a loss. Coinbase escalating its SEC fight for internal documents detailing how the regulator came to the view that cryptocurrencies are securities. Coinbase hired History Associates, which was denied access to the documents by the SEC. They are now preparing to ask a U.S. district court to force the hand of the agency, which has since suggested the reason for its initial denial may no longer be valid. Coinbase Chief Legal Officer Paul Grewal arguing on X that the internal agency communications, quote, belong to all of us, not the SEC. We then sued to end their stall, only to get an entirely new set of excuses. The Trump family-backed World Liberty Financial Project has sold almost 4% of its 20 billion token supply Wednesday, according to its sale website, which suffered numerous outages shortly after going live the day prior. That's about $10 million, far from its $300 million target. Trump's former White House communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, telling CoinDesk Live the token sale amounts to a, quote, money scam that aims to funnel money into Trump's presidential campaign war chest. According to the project's gold paper, WLFI serves as a governance token for the platform, enabling users to participate in DeFi activities like borrowing, lending, and creating liquidity pools. That's it for CoinDesk Daily. Be sure to check out more updates on CoinDesk.com. Let's take a look at the chart of the day. BTC's three-line break chart suggests a bullish outlook favoring a move to record highs above $73,000. The line break chart seen on the left from TradingView data consists of vertical lines seen here in green and red. A bullish reversal happens when the price moves higher than the highest point of the last three red lines. A bullish continuation occurs when the price moves above the previous green line, confirming an extension of the already established uptrend. That's precisely what is happening this week, with the green bar cutting through the trend line off March and April highs. Bitcoin surged to near three-month high Tuesday of 67,800 and is settling a bit below that in Wednesday's European morning trade. While the breakout on the line break chart indicates the scope for a rally to new peaks, CoinDesk's Omkar Gaboli reports that traders should be watchful of two things. The first being the candlestick chart on the right, which shows bulls have consistently failed to secure a foothold above $70,000 since March. Prices could again encounter stiff resistance around that level. The second thing to watch out for is bullish invalidation on the line break chart, represented by a new red bar taking prices back inside the channel. Failed breakouts often lead to deeper price slides as observed in late September. That's it for Chart of the Day. Check out CoinDesk.com to unpack more of the data behind top news stories. Next, close up with Nigeria and how runaway inflation is creating fertile ground for crypto adoption in West Africa.
This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block.
Welcome back. Let's talk about Nigeria. Years of economic mismanagement and low oil prices have triggered a crippling shortage of dollars in this crude-rich country. To address this problem, in May of 2023, foreign exchange restrictions were relaxed to encourage foreign investment, which had the effect of causing their national currency, the Naira, to lose 70% of its value. Maybe crypto can solve this? Joining us now to discuss building in Nigeria is Yele Badamosi. He's the CEO and co-founder of Deskcoin, a Web3 development and investment firm, and Guerra Kuana. She's the blockchain vice president at Africa's largest digital payments gateway, on Afrique. Welcome, Guerra and Yele, to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to be here.
Perhaps you can humanize this currency crisis. How is it impacting people in their everyday lives?
Yeah, good question. I think one of the things that has been happening over the last sort of couple of years, and I think this is not just Nigeria, it's happening across multiple African countries and other global majority markets as well. But fundamentally, what is going on is that you're seeing the currency devalue, and you also have corresponding rampant inflation, which makes it a lot difficult and harder for people to sort of get by and access the goods and services that they used to have access to. So you have economies that already had significant poverty rates, and people are kind of going deeper into poverty. And that is a significant challenge. So people that used to take things like Ubers or taxis are having to walk. People can't afford sort of basic necessities. And I think this is what makes us bullish about the on-chain economy, which is not really about your geographical location. So even though you're physically in a particular country, you can kind of migrate your finances and your ability to access economic opportunities regardless of where you are.
Mm-hmm. So I understand that people in their pursuit of more financial stability, they're seeking stablecoins among various options, and U.S. dollar-backed stablecoins. And is the government trying to stop this? Because I understand they have very strict capital controls in the country.
Yeah, so I think if we just zoom out and look at the reason as to why life is the way it is now and the currency is the way it is, the Naira, the Nigerian currency, was quite dependent on the price of oil. And the government did the right thing, which the central bank did the right thing, which they floated the currency last year, which, if you're an economist, that's, you're trying to fix things. But that resulted in a tank of the Naira, and everyday people have been impacted, not just oil imports, exports. And this has resulted in, yes, people seeking flight, right? And there's definitely capital controls in Nigeria and across, regions, the regions we work in, to avoid that capital flight. And stablecoins have proven to be a democratized way of anyone with an internet connection and a phone can access money that is going to help them hedge for inflation, or even as as Nigeria and Africa itself is becoming more open to the global ecosystem and e-commerce, people want access to Netflix, they want access to Starlink, they want to pay for these things, and we're seeing that people are using stablecoins or stablecoin-backed products to do this.
Mm-hmm. But is the government, I guess, suppose, trying to stop people from using stablecoins and have access to cryptocurrencies?
I mean, yeah, please take that on.
Yeah, so I think there's actually been positive developments on the regulatory side. Mm-hmm. Nigeria, South Africa have released their crypto regulation, and I do know that one of the sort of companies that got a license is actually a local stablecoin project, mm-hmm. right? So I think generally, like Guerra said, the governments understand that they're trying to stabilize the currency, and they floated sort of the currency, and it is significant and growing pains. But I think compared to maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we didn't have a lot of regulatory clarity and things like that, and so. Mm-hmm. There's definitely sort of more willingness to engage and understand the space, and so I think overall, there is sort of progress. It's still, a challenge. It's the same thing in the US and a lot of global markets, but I think we're heading in the right direction, is what I would say.
What really sort of piques my interest, and this starts to some degree with yesterday's conversation with Idris Elba and the creators that were there, which sounds like similar challenges in Ghana, and that this is not a Nigerian problem. This is an African problem, and frankly, a global majority problem. But it sounds like what both of you are working in Nestcoin and on Afrique is really trying to say not just about just the hyper-regionality, but how do we create and rewrite entire systems? And I guess I'm interested in, Guerra, I would love for you to start on this because you guys have hundreds of millions of wallets that have touched people right now across the continent and elsewhere. What is sort of like big fintech not getting about the power of entrepreneurship and creativity and just the need that people have on the ground? And why is this such a big opportunity?
So, yeah, there's a huge opportunity to serve the African region and the global majority in general as well, because this really is the only growth market in the world. What is big tech not getting? What is big finance not getting? It's not understanding that copy-paste doesn't work. You cannot take what works in a global minority region and paste it into the global majority. We've seen really great innovations like Pix in Brazil, UPI in India, the BVN in Nigeria, that are helping bank people and really just thoughtful, localized solutions. And crypto is something that, the blockchain is something that has immense impact and the ability to change lives, because if you think about any innovation in the context of the global majority, most innovations were brought to us, right? We had to tailor them for our own use later on. And we've seen leapfrogging. So like, for example, landlines were leapfrogged to mobile phones. But crypto and blockchain in general is because of its democratized nature, it's the first time a technology has reached the global majority at the same time that it reached the global minority. And we've seen bifurcation of use cases. So instead of, building for, hype cycles and speculative use cases, we definitely are pushing and seeing traction in more utility. So in the work we do on Afrique, the way that we use crypto is just definitely under the hood. Our customers don't know, or our end users and businesses that we work with don't need to know that a stablecoin is providing the cross-border payment. They just know that it costs a little bit less to send money to mom every month. And what Yele is working on with Nestcoin as well, incredibly, targeting a young and very technologically savvy population to leverage this stuff. So I think we need to see more builders like Yele and in the region who are catering to the unique needs that we find in the regions that we work in.
Maybe Yele can go into what you're doing with Nestcoin.
Yeah, I would love to piggyback on that. I think, there are landmark sort of companies that people know, like M-Pesa, and there are, things like Nubank, right? So with Nestcoin, we've created Onboard, and you can think of Onboard as a on-chain neobank. As Guerra said, targeting sort of like digitally savvy, people from the global majority market. So not just Nigeria, we're looking at Africa, Latin, Southeast Asia, and India. And the truth is, a lot of people are using stablecoins, right? If you're a creator, a developer, a builder, and you're working with someone globally, you'll probably want to get paid in stable coins instead of like the local currency, right? So we offer a very simple application that allows you to, get paid in stable coins. In the next few weeks, we're actually launching USD and Euro accounts that when that gets sent to you, it auto converts into sort of like stable coins like USDC on Base and like other networks. And the non-custodial wallet also comes with a card, which allows you to spend your crypto like you'll be able to spend money in a bank account, right? And this is available to anyone, anywhere, right? So for us, like we're literally taking world-class financial services and democratizing access to it to the people that need it the most, because we believe that when we bring people in the global majority markets on chain, they can live radically better lives.
I want to double click on what both of you said, because I think it's frankly so important. And for our community and for an event like this is, I think, where this stuff really comes out. But Guerra, you mentioned the fact that this idea of programmable money can hit the US at the same time it hits Africa, and a smart programmer, developer, entrepreneur can build at the same rate and really create opportunity for themselves. I was listening to a podcast last night with Bill Gates, and he was talking about, similarly, he said AI and blockchain are the things that hit the world at the same time, and are creating opportunities that people don't recognize are going to change the world dramatically. And when people look at India and Southeast Asia and Africa and don't recognize the power of what those markets will bring with entrepreneurship, it does shock me, I think, that folks on Twitter are still focused on the price of ETH, right? and so I just want to commend both of you on what you're working on. I would love, Guerra, can you tell us a little bit more also, but just generally what OnAfrique does? I think we heard about Nestcoin, which is amazing. Would love to hear about more what you do. And then are you working together in interesting ways? Like how does this happen as a continent?
So OnAfrique is Africa's largest payment gateway. So we've been around about 15 years now. So by no means a crypto company, definitely a fintech and a financial services company. And we over the years have built an incredible network that is across 40 countries. We have access to about 500 million in mobile money wallets. So mobile money being the leading, or at least fastest growing way of digital money, e-money in the region. And roughly 200 million bank accounts as well. So the concept is that that network is something that we leverage for anyone who needs to move money in, out, or around Africa. Some of the best use cases we've seen are intra-Africa trade, intra-Africa remittances, as well as obviously the global minority to global majority aid and investment. But we're now seeing an uptick in money going the other way, which 10, 15 years ago was not the case. Africa was a net receiver. And we're starting to see more funds leaving the region. And this is, as simple as I said, for example, we power Spotify, PayPal, people wanting to, have access to Starlink, to AWS. But as the rhetoric of Africa rising is what we've grown up with. And OnAfrique is definitely an example of a company that is driving the Africa has risen story and enabling access. So we work with some of the largest exchanges in the region. We're constantly trying to understand how we can compliantly engage with crypto, and are in constant dialogue with our regulators as well. So a lot of what I've done is trying to bring this new technology to a legacy company, and really, in the end of the day, like my thesis is that we don't need to be watching the price of ETH. We just should be following what the impact and what the actual utility of this new technology is. And Yele is someone who I've known and really admired throughout over the time I've been in this ecosystem. And a lot of builders in this space are needing rails to mobile money for on and off ramping. So that's something that we do right now as well.
I wonder how Stellar fits into the picture in your projects.
Yeah, very happy to answer that. So something that Stellar does that is quite remarkable is the fact that they have this partnership with MoneyGram that allows anyone to sort of receive USDC and then off-ramp it into, all the agents and networks that MoneyGram supports, right? So for us, that's kind of like what actually connected us with the Stellar ecosystem. I was fortunate enough to meet Daniel, and we kind of talked about what they're trying to do in terms of real-world use cases. And to be honest, like before the global majority markets began to become more, it's not the most talked about topic in crypto, but it's definitely not sort of as low as on the radar as it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And Stellar has definitely been active, deploying capital, supporting entrepreneurs. So for us at Onboard, like the opportunity as we kind of think about, being this on-chain neobank and integrating various networks and rails that can allow users to go from sort of digital money or stable coins to sort of real-world fiat money, like that's kind of like where that partnership, plays a significant sort of role and opportunity for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, Yele, with Nestcoin, your visions are not just Africa. I know you're looking at LATAM. I know you're looking at Southeast Asia as well. So what have you learned from what you're doing that you think will also apply to those other regions?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is like, when people talk about Africa, they kind of think of Africa as like Africa, but it's so diverse. So we've been quite humble in our approach, in that we don't think that we know. In fact, we know nothing about like these markets, right? So a big part of our strategy has been identifying what we call regional champions, who essentially are co-creators of, the network that we term like Onboard's Alliance, right? So literally in every single market they were in, we're identifying sort of influential builders and creators to be the one driving Onboard in their local regions. So right now we're in about 30 cities globally, and we also think city first, right? So we don't even think like country, we think city first, right? So, and it's such an interesting sort of like approach and way to think about, the world as sort of like a network of cities. And that's probably been one of the most insightful things. And, someone in India wants to come on chain because they feel like a lot of the digital innovation and fintech has been solved, because you have things like UPI and Aadhaar system. In Latin America, massive devaluation issues. In Africa, it's sort of like a challenge in receiving like FX. And probably one of the most surprising things is that even in Europe, Eastern Europe and sort of the big, popular investment markets like the UK and France, they feel like they're completely overlooked by sort of, investment capital. So if you're trying to build a fintech in Europe and you're in like Latvia or Romania, like, you're not going to get access to capital. So even in the US as well, like we found there are regions that people feel like they're undeserved and disconnected, and they feel like they've not gotten the lot, or like the best luck in life, right? And so it's just really interesting how, regardless of where you are, people feel this discomfort with the status quo, and they're looking for opportunities to exit status quo. And that's why like our vision at Onboard is literally to allow anyone anywhere to be able to come on chain and live a radically better life. And we truly believe that, and everyone that is a part of our ecosystem also believes that as well. And I think you guys also do also. So yeah.
I'm curious, regionally, where are you seeing the most activity on your platform on Afrique?
Do you know what? It's Pan-African. Obviously, the obvious answer is Nigeria, which is the most populous country. But I'd like to maybe point my attention to a region that is not so well known, and we're seeing a lot more traction, a lot of adoption, is Francophone Sub-Saharan Africa. So it's not just one country; it's an entire region, and one that is growing in terms of young populations. Again, technically savvy, and I definitely like the DRC, Cameroon, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin. There's regions like this that are really showing quite a lot of promising hockey stick type growth and need as well for services like ours. But yeah,
it's interesting because are you seeing that they are completely skipping the PC area and going straight to crypto or blockchain?
Mobile has completely, like leapfrogged computers. People don't, like most people, a young, smart person in, say, Kinshasa, DRC, probably doesn't have a laptop. They have a mobile phone, though, and they have a smartphone which is connected to a mobile money wallet, which has got a MetaMask wallet possibly attached to that, and is likely doing a gig job on something like Fiverr, and they need to get paid, or maybe they need to watch Netflix every day, and they're using their mobile phone to do this. So yes, there's definitely a leapfrogging that has happened. I mean, I don't like that term very much because it's quite cliche, but it's definitely like a carving a different path is what we're seeing.
And I think I genuinely believe that in a lot of global majority markets, there'll be young sort of adults or like teens who would have a sort of on-chain wallet, before they have a bank account, right? Like the same way how people have email addresses when they first come online. I think that a lot of people, as they begin to come on chain for the first time and they're beginning to like earn, they would have on-chain wallets, right? And it's sort of like you said, like it's a bit of a shame that people are watching like prices of these assets, but I watched the Vitalik's documentary, and I've kind of accepted that the price action is actually a feature, not a bug. It pulls people in, and it's a massive kind of like awareness filter. and then people who, we use this term like new gen internally at Onboard, and for us is basically the new generation or the next generation of builders and creators who are coming on chain not because of the speculation, but because they see that on chain represents a radically better creative reality, and that they can build the future that they want, and then they can impact it, right? And so we really want to sort of push and celebrate this subculture. We didn't create it, but it's definitely something that we're seeing across the global majority markets. So it's pretty, I think even at DEF CON, there's a GM day, and these are some of and basically just means global majority markets. And there's a lot of like these types of conversations, and Ethereum is also taking like awareness around it, and like Stellar is doing amazing work. And I think we're seeing more and more folks begin to realize that this path is a much more sustainable one for the whole on-chain economy.
Awesome. Well, Yele Guerra, thank you so much for joining us. That was Nestcoin CEO Yele Badamosi and on Africa Blockchain Vice President Guerra Cubana. Up next, we head over to Central America, where a charity is using sport to unite kids.
This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block. This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block.
Welcome back. Every year, Stellar Meridian works with a charity and highlights an area of the world that deserves improved payment systems. This year's focus is Guatemala, where Brian Weaver, founder of Hoops Sagrado, heads a nonprofit that organizes trips to Guatemala for kids who play pickup basketball. He joins us now. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. So tell us a bit about this charity. How was it inspired? Give us the story.
So we've been around for about 25 years, and I think anyone who's traveled to the States knows that a lot of inner cities on the East Coast have had like a long issue with crew and gang violence. And Washington, D.C. in the early 90s was known as the murder capital of America. And during that time, a lot of people who knew kids in the communities who, you would see them in schools and things like that, who knew they were good people, tried to find innovative ways to intervene. And my idea was to find a time during the summer when most of the violence sort of had an uptick to get them out of D.C. And because my connection with them was basketball, I was like, all right, we're going to do something with basketball. And I had just come back from Guatemala and made these amazing connections with folks in indigenous communities, Mayan communities in the West. And I thought this would be such a sort of radical, life-shaking sort of thing to be one in Washington, D.C. one day, and then next on the side of a mountain in Guatemala the next, where Spanish is not the native language, but Mayan dialects still are prevalent. And so ever since then, for 25 years, we've been taking kids to the same region in Guatemala, coming through, generational kids who were in our camps now are sending their children to camps in Guatemala. And it's been really interesting to be on the ground and sort of see the revolution that's kind of happened in the developing world, where anyone that we wanted to talk to before, we would have to set up an appointment for them to go to a conference center at the phone company in a major city and wait in like a queue for hours to make a phone call to the United States. But when those little Frijalito Nico phones started going all around the world, the way that they changed Africa, they changed Central America too. Suddenly everyone had a connection to the rest of the world in their pocket. Our hope now is that we're going to be able to sort of take that and move it forward because now that everybody ends up having like an iPhone or some sort of smartphone in their pocket.
Brian, how did you get connected with Stellar? How, like, you're in London. How did this all happen, and why them and you?
You know, it was kind of an interesting thing. Lindsay, who works for Stellar, and I had played basketball together. She is a complete hoop head, very good basketball player. Stellar had some people and some connections with a 3-on-3 tournament that was going on in the States. Lindsay and I just struck up a friendship, and I was kind of lamenting some issues with things that she was talking about, and I know nothing. I'm completely wet about the behind the ears in this world, but I've learned so much. And like hearing the stories of folks that are trying to open wallets in Africa, in the developing world of Southeast Asia, you realize there's a lot of overlap in the developing world, and suddenly it's opened my eyes to completely new things. So just through like a casual friendship based over basketball with Lindsay, it really now has me thinking how we do business. Not only in Guatemala, but in southern Mexico and in El Salvador.
And when we were chatting yesterday over coffee, you mentioned something around, you know, the people on the ground have to get these big wads of cash and kind of figure out how to like disperse it.
Kind of unceremoniously, you find yourself like back on the humble path of your life, where someone referred to me last year as we were on a bus as Narco Santa Claus, because I had a big suitcase full of quetzales that I was like going to pay families or pay schools and things. And I just thought to myself, yeah, man, there has to be a better way than being able to do this. But if you're traveling and you're in a very remote part of Guatemala, you need to find, like, if we're going through a bank, I have to be in a city. I think the great thing and the possibility here with a partnership with Stellar would be that MoneyGram is kind of ubiquitous. It's everywhere. There's a little tienda. Somebody is selling like soda and chips on the side of the road. They still have like a MoneyGram account and be able to dispense remittances from folks back in the U.S. Our hope is that we can sort of take out the middleman who has to come and dole out cash to everyone, and that somebody would set up our own accounts with people. So if a kid from DC is staying with a host family, that money would go directly to a host family. If we're working with the school, we can pay the school directly, as opposed to what we're really doing now, which is cash in envelopes when we have to be there, which seems like such an antiquated system. But really, it's the most efficient way that we've been able to do it, and it just seems very backwards in this day and age.
Well, we've been hearing a lot of stories over the last 2 days of people who are developing kind of wallet solutions, really, which are just financial apps for this exact same purpose.
Well, I think there's two things. And I remember forgive me, I can't remember who it is. I think it was someone maybe from Stripe who talked about it's the native thing. When you start to like feel that this is like just like a part of normal banking, part of a normal sort of industry, I think that'll be the buy-in. And for better or for worse, I think that seeing El Salvador in Central America like adopt Bitcoin has really kind of like sort of destigmatized it, I think, with a lot of folks. And suddenly it's like people have kind of understand a little bit about that. But the wallet thing, if you can feel confident, and this will be that next step. If you feel confident that like money I'm sending you from the United States when it gets to your wallet in Guatemala is as secure as being in a bank, then I think that's that threshold. Because for indigenous folks in Guatemala, there's such a stigma and such racism. Most of the paperwork that you would need to open a bank account in the city just doesn't exist. And you have to come in with a lot of cash. So this would be a way for them to like bypass all of that sort of bureaucracy and be able to develop their own accounts. Which I think if you're not just for somebody who's working with us, but if you're an artisan, if you are making like textiles or traditional Mayan masks or furniture or things like that, you don't just have to sell your stuff to someone in a market who then puts it somewhere where gringos are coming through to buy them. You can, go and do this digitally. You can do it online. You could, sell it out of the back of your pickup truck to folks. It could be a completely game changer. The same way that like those little phones really just revolutionized the world 20 years ago.
And from what I understand, are you accepting donations in cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, if everybody's here, and if you're gonna get a bean coffee, if anyone got the little bean cards and put it on your app here at the conference, you can get your coffee, but you can also leave a donation to Hoop Sagrado.
Okay.
We got a couple of our alums who are here who are not happy with me because I found pictures of them from when they were 15 and on the trip. These are guys now in their 20s and 30s. So I've tried to embarrass them as much as possible. Yeah, but we're taking it through being on here at the conference.
And it's interesting that you're taking kids from the DC area to Guatemala. There must be that language barrier. So I wonder, how does that interaction come together, and what magic happens?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, one is we try to get those kids into Spanish classes while we're down there. Okay. And so they study it, but then there's a lot of just sort of pigeon, learning words, learn as you sort of go, which I always think is the best way to learn a language, is be active and sort of pick it up as you're going along. But the other part is, and this has been something in the last 5 years, I'm starting to see now kids of undocumented folks who've come into the States, whose children have been born in the States and are American citizens, who've never gone back to Central America. So now we end up almost having a built-in translator who sort of comes in. But we try to teach everyone how to count to 10 in Mayan before we go. So you're doing.
But I guess the universal language here is basketball.
It is, but it's great because I think we're working on so many different levels: Quiche, English, Spanish, and then the international love of basketball.
All right, Brian. Final question.
Yes.
Is it the outside game or your inside game that is your strong suit?
Oh, it's definitely my outside game. Well, now it's as I've gotten older and a little bit chubbier, I feel like now I can just throw my weight around. But that was Lindsay and I were having a 3-point shooting contest, and she's actually a really good outside shooter. So I'd love to take her to the court, particularly if there's a bunch of super machismo dudes who are there who think, oh, the pretty blonde lady, she can't play ball, and then she comes out and
just rain it down.
Well, not only that she wrecks people, and I don't know if this is her naturally or Stellar, but she's also a world-class trash talker. Oh. And somehow I feel
Lindsay is great at that.
Excellent. All right. We'll end it there. Thank you, Brian, so much for joining us. That was Brian Weaver. He's the founder of Hope Sagrado, a nonprofit that organizes trips to Guatemala for kids who play pickup basketball. All right. Let's take a look at some highlights from yesterday. We have some session swaps. Good morning, or should I say cheerio? We are live from Stellar Meridian in London.
It's a big year for us at Stellar. We're marking our 10 years since the network was launched. So transformation is a lot about what's the transformation we've seen over the last 10 years, and what do we hope, what kind of transformation do we want to see from the network, from our builders, from all this very big global ecosystem who's participating in Stellar in the next 10 years.
World Liberty Financial, a DeFi protocol supported by Donald Trump and his family, will start selling tokens today.
It's a money scam. He can get some of his donors to funnel money into that. It ends up in his pocket, and then he can fund things that he needs to do for himself. I mean, it's a transparent scam, and you should avoid it at all costs.
We're announcing our MoneyGram wallet. So for the first time, we're enabling USDC transfers through the MoneyGram network through a special app.
So we are launching our first crypto wallet. It's a non-custodial wallet that is integrated seamlessly into the Tala app experience. And it is, again, leveraging the Stellar network and their partners.
This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block.
This month, the top 2 largest crypto exchanges in the world announced they would delist non-compliant stablecoins in the European Union. Notably, Circle's USDC will stay listed as they are the first global stablecoin issuer to secure a stablecoin license in the EU. Joining us to discuss global policy are Dante Despart. He's the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Global Policy at Circle, and Candice Kelly. She's the Chief Legal Officer of the Stellar Development Foundation. Welcome to the show, Candice and Dante.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right, so we did hear from Coinbase, and Binance has expressed similarly that they will be delisting non-compliant tokens, stable coins, in the EU by December 30th. Yet USDC managed to stay listed. So, I mean, how did you do that? How were you able to secure the first license, and what kind of, rules, audits, or, transparency needs to happen for that to happen?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think the Markets and Crypto Assets Framework, Europe's new far-reaching rules for crypto, give the industry what we have asked for a long time: legal certainty and regulatory clarity across the entire EU and common market. But with that, their cost, right? Their cost of doing business. And I think in the European Union, if you want to be a compliant stablecoin issuer, what the EU calls an e-money token, you need to be a regulated e-money issuer across all of Europe. And so Circle chose France as the base of regulatory operations in Europe. We have an e-money license out of France, and as a result, USDC and our euro-denominated stablecoin EURC are the only 2 major stablecoins in circulation that are MiCA compliant.
Mm-hmm. What kind of level of transparency is needed to be compliant?
Yeah, I think the requirements in Europe specifically, I think, it goes well beyond what would be required in many other countries with stablecoins, and in some ways enshrines Circle's way of doing business as law. We were the first of the major players to provide monthly attestations. We're audited as a company. And the e-money framework in Europe, of course, requires very strict reserve standards, but it also requires that you care about financial crime compliance and a whole host of these other issues. So it's a very conservative regime that looks more like e-money than it would internet funny money.
Mm-hmm. And Candice, did Stellar have a hand in guiding policy in the EU at all?
We certainly engage in the EU and across the world, and we've always sort of subscribed to what Circle did as an industry participant before there were regulations. And as there are not so many clear regulations across the globe, I think Circle has been a standard setter, and we have been very aligned with putting forth those policies and procedures and that transparency that you just emphasized that Circle has had at its core from the start.
I guess, Candice, going back to you, I mean, Stellar and Circle do a lot of work together in this world. But Stellar also supports a lot of emerging markets. We've heard a lot over the last 2 days about people who really love this sort of dynamic of a USDC, Stellar to a MoneyGram, whatever it may be. And I'm sure a lot of those jurisdictions haven't thought about this. So, do you expect there to be more regulation in those emerging markets? Or is it really something like France taking the lead and then, seeing how it goes first?
Yeah, I think that there are always certain jurisdictions that take the lead. In many circumstances, that's the United States. Obviously, that is not the case right now. But the EU with MiCA has really taken the first step forward. And I think there are a lot of jurisdictions that are looking to the EU. I think if you look at privacy law, GDPR, it's very similar. There's a patchwork still today in the United States of privacy laws, but there's GDPR, and a lot of countries, if you are GDPR compliant, you're going to be fine in a lot of the emerging markets because they either follow it or they haven't reached their own decision on what the regulations should look like. Mm-hmm. But it's a high bar.
I would say there are regionally within Europe, even though some differences. For instance, in Switzerland with FINMA, they recently released guidance that they want all stablecoin issuers to verify wallet addresses. And I just wonder, what do you thought on these finer details?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Switzerland is not a part of the EU, but Switzerland as a jurisdiction, I've worked extensively in Switzerland in my past life. And FINMA as a primary regulator is also a very, very forward-leaning and pro-innovation regulator. But the rules that are emerging in most countries around the world, especially when it comes to stablecoin activity, is they're trying to reconcile this innovation in the banking and payment system. Stablecoins broadly will be treated as electronic money. in most jurisdictions around the world. And what we could expect of Switzerland is a regime that would be principled, that would protect consumers, obviously guard the role of the banking system more generally, but look to harmonize either with MiCA or harmonize with rules in different jurisdictions around the world. So we're watching the developments in Switzerland closely.
Really, they want to whitelist all wallet addresses from stablecoin issues. Is that, I don't know?
Yeah, I mean, I think
onerous?
when you talk to regulators as much as I have over the years, I think one of the things that regulators gain a lot from in licensing companies like Circle and working with us at the policy level is sort of an operating level understanding of how to ensure regulations are principled versus prescriptive. If you make too prescriptive a set of regulations with crypto, the industry is evolving too fast, the technologies are evolving too fast, and so the more principled the regulations are, the better. And I would expect in Switzerland relatively principled rules to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And Candace, you mentioned the U.S. should be the one leading this, but really Europe has allowed it. Knowing that just the state of the world now, do you expect post-election, regardless who wins, that we will start to see some change happening there?
Absolutely. I think what the changes are may be a little bit different depending on how the election turns out, but there are certainly plenty of people on the Hill who have gotten, I mean, in the 5 years that I've been in this space, the difference in the maturity of the conversations that we are having and the people who really understand it and really understand the value both all the way from the financial inclusion aspects to the national security aspects and can have sophisticated thoughts on the topic. And so I think that the White House will have a new leader. There will certainly be changes on the Hill, but there will still be a lot of people who are there who are champions and really become experts in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And Dante, you talk to these folks. I'm assuming you are hearing from both sides that they want the innovation angle to happen. And so do you think that there's a younger swell of people who are coming up and saying, let's not play these old games and let's actually do something?
Yeah. I mean, my broad policy message in the U.S. was recently, crypto is purple. That we as an industry and I think policymakers as policymakers would be very well served in not politicizing or weaponizing a novel technology. The Biden administration was the very first U.S. administration to issue an executive order looking at crypto broadly, and it embarked on a whole-of-government study of this innovation, which was the first time we had a conversation in D.C. about crypto and blockchain infrastructure being meaningful beyond finance, and thinking it as more of just foundational technology across the board. And I'm encouraged, despite the tension and despite the partisanship in presidential politics, that there's permanence in the Senate and in the House on the interest of getting stablecoin legislation across the finish line. Maxine Waters recently called for a grand bargain to be made, even in the lame duck session. And I think that pent-up interest needs a legislative outlet.
Mm-hmm. Have you delved into the policies of Asia? How do they compare to Europe and what you're seeing in America?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have, it may sound ambitious, but we're broadcasting from London, so to describe a model in which the sun would never set on Circle's operations was actually something we had set course on when I joined the company. And we're a major payments institution in Singapore, so we're fully licensed in Singapore, obviously fully licensed in Europe out of France. And there's a lot of developments in Asia. It's no sooner than Singapore started really re-engaging the industry. You saw Hong Kong also beginning to come back online. You see very principled rules in Japan that enable passportability of regulated stablecoins into the Japanese market. And I think a sleeping giant in Asia in some respects is South Korea, a country with an enormous industrial base and technology base and a long history in sort of being at the cutting edge of these technologies. And so you could envision not only lots of competition across Asian jurisdictions, but my sincere hope is that we start to see harmonization among them. So that's my big policy message to the world, is you'd be well served in regulating crypto assets and bringing us into the perimeter, but you would also be very well served in creating rules that are harmonized. So we keep the properties of this being an internet of value versus having a firewall stand between what these innovations could really do for people.
Are you seeing the same? Who's the leader here? Is it Asia? Is it Europe? And I don't know about America, but
I don't know who the leader is. I don't know. There are different jurisdictions that have strengths and weaknesses. I think what Dante was talking about in terms of the harmonization is what we're really trying. I think the industry has a really important role to play because people like Dante and I do travel around the world, and there are certainly other bodies that bring that harmonization, but I think that engaging and really emphasizing how important that the borderless nature of the blockchain technology is, and how the regulations do need to stay at that principled level, and they do need to have harmonization of with respect to standards and the regulations as well.
Well, at least in Europe, now that USDC will stay listed, I saw that Tether is among those include that may be delisted. They say that they will try to find a solution to comply with the regulations. But is this a chance for USDC to have a flippening and overcome and become the, closer to the becoming the top stablecoin in the game? Because Tether has 70% of the total market cap in stablecoins. Do you see that emerging in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the European regime is, in my view, what we should expect of major jurisdictions around the world. Brazil, for example, in the early part of 2025, will embark on a set of rules for stablecoin issuers, a set of rules for crypto assets. And my sense is that this is a country that has mirrored MiCA, mirrored GDPR in its privacy laws, and very likely to mirror the standards set by MiCA. And frankly, the onus is on the crypto exchanges in Europe. That's the next point of policy pressure and regulatory leverages, and you saw from Binance and you saw from Coinbase very clear signals to the market about this change. Our products really depend on digital asset exchanges, and they also, of course, depend on the broader blockchain ecosystem. We're trusted because we're well regulated, and if you want to build for the long term, you have to do it inside the regulatory perimeter. What that does to circulation in the short run, I think, matters for the here and now, but I think if you're looking at the very, very long opportunity horizon for digital assets and stablecoins, we're building for that future.
I see that over $4 billion in value has been exchanged using USDC on the Stellar network. Companies leveraging USDC include MoneyGram, Circle, Bitso, Mercado Bitcoin, CoinMe, and Fireblocks. Candice, can you tell me a bit about how USDC, these stablecoins, are being used?
Yeah, well, from the foundation standpoint, our mission is creating equitable access to the global financial system. So we get very excited to see the use cases where there really are problems that are being solved by this new technology, and the use of USDC and the stablecoin is so important to that. So one use is the UNHCR that is using the MoneyGram integration and Circle and a non-custodial wallet called Vibrant to deliver aid to internally displaced Ukrainians. And to date, over $5 million have been delivered in this way on a weekly basis. Families in Ukraine are receiving USDC in a wallet, and then they can cash it out at MoneyGram. Many of them have bank accounts, and so MoneyGram can also do ACH wires. We see similar things in the global south. In Colombia, there's a town called San Francisco where the decaf wallet is being used with USDC. It was a very cash-dependent community, and now the people there are able to do work for folks outside of their very remote community and earn in USDC because they couldn't do that sort of work and they couldn't earn money outside of their community. So now it's really changing their financial literacy, their financial picture. They're being able to save money, put it towards education of their children. And so it's really a game changer. And I think that sometimes when we sit in London or we sit in Washington, D.C., it's hard to remember those stories and how much this really is a transformational technology. And the stablecoin, that stable store of value that Circle has proven to many regulators is true, is really making great changes in people's lives.
Dante, my final question for you is, I keep thinking about stablecoins really being the true unlock of the blockchain's opportunity. And when we interviewed Paulo from Tether, he did mention the idea that emerging markets were his main focus. But I also see such a value in large opportunity transfers for business. So where do you see as the future of stablecoins for use cases and utility as we move forward? Is it emerging markets? Is it for kind of lubricating larger business opportunities at scale and at speed? What's the real unlock for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is no question a dollar store of value use case is the existing killer app for stablecoins. And in some respects, as Candace just described, the thing that is unlocking demonstrable proof of what our original promises were in crypto. Democratizing access to payments and banking and money. And then I think there's this entire machine-to-machine economy and internet-scale economy that is indeed going to unlock. Your and my financial needs don't take bank holidays. Our money shouldn't either. And I think of this as an innovation that can completely behave within the perimeter of regulated finance, but it also has to be banked, it has to be trusted, it has to be completely liquid around the world. And I think we would be well served in ending the sort of anti-establishment narrative in crypto and start to assume that this is a convergence technology that will converge with what regulators would like to see, what central banks would like to see, and frankly, what people and markets need. So I think there's space for all of these use cases to coexist.
Candace, you've gone on record saying that you've been talking to central banks about CBDCs. Can you give us any insights on those talks, which central banks you may be talking to?
Well, we talked to various central banks, and our role really is just to make sure that they understand the technology and all of the ways that that can be used to issue compliant assets, and whether that's a stablecoin or a CBDC, we're not here to pick winners. We just are here to advise, and I think that it's been shown that the Stellar network is really well suited for any kind of regulated asset. One exciting area is it's not technically a CBDC, but there's a consortium of banks in Ukraine who have started the Transparent Network, and that's integrating with merchants and being able to have an e-hryvnia that is used. And I think particularly when we see the future where there's going to be a lot of money going in for reconstruction there, that it's really important for a country like Ukraine to have that transparency in their local currency, because they've clearly had some issues with a reputation of corruption, and that transparency that the blockchain brings, and then being able to have their own local currency on the blockchain is going to be a really significant part of making sure that the funds that they're going to need are freely and comfortably given to them, because people will know that it's where it's going and how it's being spent.
All right, Candace, Dante, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you.
Right,
Thank you
that
so
was
much.
Thanks again.
Candace Kelly, Chief Legal Officer of the Stellar Development Foundation, as well as Dante Desvart. He's the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Global Policy at Circle. Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break.
This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block.
The stablecoin market capitalization stacks up to over $170 billion today, a drop in the bucket in what is expected to grow to a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Stablecoin issuer Paxos is increasingly building market share through its growing list of Paxos-issued assets that include stablecoins for PayPal, Binance, its eponymous Pax Dollar, and more. Joining us to discuss is Charles Cascarella. He's the CEO and co-founder of Paxos. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I understand you also have an announcement at the conference.
Yes. So we're really proud to say that the Paxos family of stablecoins will be coming to the Stellar network. We think this is very exciting given the reach and global nature of what Stellar represents and the ecosystem that it has. We're excited to be able to bring some of our dollar stablecoins, also our gold stablecoin, the whole family to this ecosystem.
How do you think a stablecoin on Stellar will be used regionally? What are you seeing?
Well, I think stablecoins can do two things. One is democratize access to dollars. Everybody wants dollars. Dollars move basically like mail in the post office right now. But everyone wants a dollar. They want to be able to have it move 24/7 instantaneously, low cost, programmable. And if you look around the world, more people have smartphones than have bank accounts, which is also kind of completely crazy, really, at this day and age. Smartphones have been around for 15 years. Banks have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's not creating universal access. Stablecoins have that ability to create universal access for dollars. And also, you can start to have yield where you pass on the T-bill return that's backing a stablecoin, and you can democratize access to interest. And I think that's very, very powerful for people who live in currencies and countries where there is a lot of destabilization in terms of the value, but also the inability to have what is very safe yield that you're generating.
Can you go into that a little bit more, Charles? I think that people don't they underestimate the power of yield on both short-term and long-term opportunities, especially around stablecoins, because it's not only that you get usage and the ability, especially in an emerging market where you can take out at the highest value at that moment in need, but the fact that you can sort of compound it, right? And what that can do to transform a locality or a charity. I think that if you could just give us a little bit more insight on why yield is so important.
Well, the first thing someone wants if they don't have access to it is a dollar. And then once you have a dollar, you're trying to think, well, what can I do with this? And there's lots of things you can do with it. Of course, you could go buy crypto. You could participate in the DeFi lending ecosystem. But if you said, I just want to have the safest yield possible, you can't do that today. You can't just go very easily buy T-bills. If you're a retail person, you have $100 of stable coins. Certainly, if you could get a bank account and you have $100, you can't get the risk-free rate. But now you can. We have a product called the Lift Dollar, USDL. It's regulated out of Abu Dhabi by the FSRA. It is bankruptcy protected. If anything happens to Paxos, your funds are safe. And you can now get the programmatic risk-free rate paid to you daily. Every single day, it just accrues in your account for not having to do anything. And it's freely sendable, not in the U.S., but freely sendable, just like a stablecoin. And that's an important foundational asset for anybody to be able to have access to who wants to be able to have security from a financial perspective, but also be able to generate income and generate return without having to have the opacity or the real sophistication that you need when you start to get into the DeFi ecosystem and having a lot of complexity in how lending works.
So in the stablecoin business, my understanding is that it pays to, the business model pays to be big to generate yield. So if you're creating multiple or all these stablecoins for different companies, does that impose upon that business model at all?
Well, I think their stablecoins are in some ways like a network, and in some ways it's like a loyalty program. And so there's not going to probably be thousands of stablecoins. There's not going to be hundreds of stablecoins. There'll probably only be maybe 2 or 3 very big stablecoins. But I think there's a real logic for certain types of companies to have their own stablecoin. Either because they have a really big internal network, like, say, PayPal, or it could be that you want to have loyalty programs and other things that you make available for internal network or internal usage. And there'll be a lot of discovery in the product market about how someone is able to get to scale versus how someone is maybe just using this as a way to broaden their connection, just like, say, Target does with their credit card, or you've seen this at a lot of other institutions. It is something that's very logical.
You mentioned PayPal, so I want to get into the privacy concerns around that, because folks were concerned about how PayPal could potentially freeze their accounts or wipe their balances. Is that something built in at all? Should people be concerned?
Well, I mean, look, stablecoins are set up where there's an issuer. In this case, it happens to be Paxos. By the way, it could be Tether, it could be Circle, and everyone is sitting here trying to comply with rules and laws, and stablecoins move freely. If some jurisdiction came and said, you know what, someone is using a stablecoin illegally, you have the ability to protect the integrity of that token through a mechanism like seize and freeze. And I think everyone has it. Everyone's done it. Tether's done it. Circle's done it. We've done it. That's a lot different because you're getting it from a lawful jurisdiction than if some company has terms and conditions. And so you want to make this dollar move as freely as possible so that there can be a lot of trustworthiness with it. That's why we create regulated stablecoins. We're the only issuer where we're have primary regulation on top of us. That's different than every other issuer. And we do that because you want to create trustworthiness that allows it to scale to societal-wide usage. And part of that is making sure that someone who has it in their wallet can go use it whenever they want.
Charles, I know you have to run, so I'm going to try to make this quick. I have a 22-year-old kid. Christine has a young child. Both of them are barely ever going to touch cash, right? So when you think of stablecoins and really digital money in the future, do you see that this is where it's going to go? Or do you see sort of traditional finance trying to fight back and saying, no, we want to own the monetary systems or governments? I mean, I feel like stablecoins are the answer here. But I just wonder your thoughts when you look 5 years in the future.
Well, I think the interesting thing about blockchain is that it's enabling an open financial system that can move like the internet. And I think the traditional financial system is an intranet. And this is an old way of doing things where you have a closed network. And the power of open systems is that it creates innovation and openness and inclusion, of course. And so that's why I think stablecoins are so powerful, because you now have a new way of being able to move money around that fits with the modern economy. And I think that's something that isn't in opposition to traditional financial institutions, but it's in opposition to the way traditional financial networks have operated, because you're in a closed system and you can't join it unless you're let in. And even then, those networks are written in old ways and they're not programmable. Taking a dollar and being able to make it so that anybody in the world can have access to it changes, well, one, I think the position of the dollar, but also changes the financial position of almost the whole world, because so many people are unbanked and underbanked. In the U.S., it's actually 25% of the population is unbanked or underbanked by the Federal Reserve's own surveys. Mm-hmm. And outside of the U.S., it's something like 30 or 35% of people. I mean, this is a huge amount of people who don't have access. But I was talking about how people have smartphones. You can have a smartphone, you don't have access, now you do. And that is a game changer for the world. And how people can lift themselves out of the whatever financial position that they're in. I have friends who, in certain countries where they've had their savings wiped out multiple times in their life. We don't necessarily always think about that if you're in a large country or a G7 country, but it's true, and that's what happens. This is what stablecoins are here to solve.
All right. Charles, I know you got to run, but thank you so much for
Great to be here.
us.
Thanks for having me.
That was Paxos CEO and co-founder Charles Cascarella. After the break, we'll have more from the Stellar Meridian conference.
This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block. This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block.
Welcome back. Artificial intelligence is supercharging innovation on blockchains, and quantum computing is threatening to disrupt it all. Joining us now to discuss is blockchain in the future of artificial intelligence and quantum is Daniela Barbosa. She's the general manager of decentralized technologies at the Linux Foundation and executive director of the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. All right, Daniela, thank you so much for joining us. So there seems to be, artificial intelligence has really made disruption in tech, and there's emerging a battle between decentralized versus centralized artificial intelligence. And I'm wondering how you weigh in on the situation?
Yeah, so, LF Decentralized Trust is an open source consortium. We have, 17 different projects, but across the Linux Foundation, which is the home for open source projects, some of the world's largest, most important projects like the Linux kernel and Kubernetes and others, really drilling down on the open source code projects and the communities working on artificial intelligence, for example, is really important. We actually have a project that's focused on that called LF Data and AI. So blockchain becomes a critical part of that when you start thinking about the trust and transparency that is needed for trusted AI. And that's where we're seeing a lot of work and a lot of engineers getting together to develop new projects around that space.
Is there advocacy toward more decentralized artificial intelligence versus centralized?
Yeah, certainly, we're seeing more and more moves across the space to decentralization. We just launched this LF Decentralized Trust Foundation about a month ago. It's an expansion of all the work that the community has been working on in blockchain, in digital identity, with artificial intelligence, with forward-looking innovations like in quantum computing. This is all critical to creating this new market infrastructure, for example, where AI rails will actually, be part of getting information and sharing information.
Daniela, I'm old, so I'm going to just start with that. But, I feel like Linux was really formed under this idea that we should not allow for centralized technologies to run our lives. And it was, I think, a very admirable way and a very successful way to sort of champion that. I feel like we're now in the same situation when it comes to AI. We have a couple companies who are spending so much money on compute that they're blocking others out. We have others who are not open sourcing their models versus those who are. So do you think it's even a choice that we should be having the conversation of centralized versus decentralized, or really is the only way that this works for the good of humanity to be decentralized?
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is that it needs to be decentralized, for sure. And that's how you're going to, once again, reach the trust and transparency that end users need in order to be able to trust that data that they have access to. I think that we're also very early on in a lot of these conversations, and very importantly, implementations, right? So until we do implementations, until we get the users and contributors to figure out the things that are actually going to work in today's world, but also thinking forward, how we're going to fix the problems in the future. I think that's really important. The key thing, your mention about the Linux Foundation and what the Linux Foundation does, over the last 20 years is really about decentralized development of code projects and standards and specifications. And that means having a community that's really diverse, coming in to work around what these technologies should do and very often not do as well. A diverse community that works with regulators, for example, as these technologies go back into production, into our day-to-day life living. And I think it's really important to understand that decentralization of the code is just as important as decentralization of data as well. And that's what the Linux Foundation does, essentially, for the developer community.
Can you give a sampling of some of the standards developed, and has there been any consensus reached?
In the data and AI space, I'm actually not the expert in the standards. There's a lot of great people that are working on that as well.
I want to touch on the Post-Quantum Cryptography Alliance at Linux. They aim to safeguard digital infrastructures against quantum-era threats. So I'm wondering there, can you identify the threat and how do you safeguard it?
Yeah, so, the Post-Quantum Cryptography Alliance is a sister project to LF Decentralized Trust. And we have hundreds of open source projects at the Linux Foundation that, once again, are addressing market needs from a technology perspective. Quantum computing, there is, your private cryptography keys, for example, will eventually be broken by a quantum machine. There is no doubt about it, right? So how do you make sure that you build these systems to be quantum proofed for the future? So I'll give you an example, right? So let's say you're running a blockchain now, and you're using, blockchain, and you have, the need to have that data private, right? So maybe you're using, ZK proofs technology or something else, and you need to have that data private for 10, 20 years. If quantum computing comes and breaks that data, that private key, you have a problem. So this is why PCQA and other leaders in the organization are getting together to come up with these ways to make sure that post-quantum computing won't break the private keys. And if they do, what are the practices to make sure that you're fixing them before going into production?
Wow.
We've been hearing about the specter of quantum computing taking over all of our private, emails, keys, whatever it may be, for a while now. Is this a 2-year horizon, 5-year horizon? Where do we think we need to get to before it's too late?
Yeah, well, the industry obviously thinks it needs to be addressed now. So some of the biggest companies are actually participating and in PCQA, in Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust, and other projects as well. So the industry knows it needs to be addressed now. I think, there's also a lot of great academic work, and this is where when you see in technology, innovation comes very fast from the academic community. And we're seeing a lot of academic work coming into the Linux Foundation as well to address this. So I personally don't know if it's going to be a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year. We could all, play on the markets and maybe do some betting on it. But I do think that the industry is not only well aware of it, they are dedicating resources in order to make sure they can solve this.
All right. There's also the Linux Foundation. They're partnering to continue a fight against patent trolls. As it relates to blockchain, what's the work there?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar that much with that project, but I do think that as the industry, and when I talk about the industry, this is users. It could be the biggest banks to technology companies to public governments as well. Patent trolling is really going to be an important aspect of how do you use open source and then create innovation on top of it.
All right.
I want to ask a question, which is, we have a bit of a problem, I think, in the blockchain industry. Events like this are fantastic, right? We have amazing developers and entrepreneurs and creative thinkers here. When you look at the sheer number of developers who are in Web 2 still, the ones who are in Web 3 and blockchain are a drop in the bucket. And what do you think it takes? Or I guess let me rephrase it. One would think that the Linux developers who support open source would be really interested in these new technologies. But I think we still see some friction, and I don't know if it's because the Meta and Google throw so much money at them, or there's too much sort of bad stigma around blockchain. How do we get more developers to want to be working in blockchain, and have you seen success in being able to do that in what you're working in?
Yeah, we definitely do. So, one of the things the Linux Foundation does is we do training and education. And as these technologies become more, being used in the enterprise, we come out with certification courses. We come out with training. And it's funny that you mentioned the Web 3 versus Web 2, because, very often in the Web 3 space, we'll talk to engineers, and they're participating in our community as well, but they say, what do we need professional certification for? I watched this on YouTube, I learned how to do it, and I do it. This is how I do it. The thing is, with enterprises and large companies, when they're hiring engineers, they do want to test out these skills, right? So when those Web 2 engineers or those Web 3 engineers are trying to get work in traditional companies, in banks, in public sector, for example, they're going to be asked, hey, do you know are you certified to be a developer in this? And this is the same thing that we've seen in cloud computing, right? Cloud computing also was something that in the enterprise space, nobody kind of wanted to touch it. It took years and years to get there, but that's where we're at now.
And since you're at the Stellar Meridian conference, so are you doing work with Stellar? What do you, what are you looking forward to at the conference?
Sure. So, Stellar's actually been part of our ecosystem at the Linux Foundation since 2017. They joined what was then known as the Hyperledger project in order to support our blockchain work specifically. And you'll see more and more ways that the Stellar ecosystem is working with us. One of the things that we just announced a couple of months ago was we have a project called Hyperledger Cacti, which is an interoperability. So how do we move these assets from blockchain to blockchain? One of the companies that supports the foundation contributed a project called for two Hyperledger cacti for a bridge, basically a connector, a plug-in connector from Stellar to other Hyperledger and non-Hyperledger projects. So now Bezu, which is one of the EVM projects that many of the banks and tokenization projects out there are using, they can very easily move money from permission chains to public chains using the Stellar connector that was built and contributed to the foundation by Cheesecake Labs. So there's a lot of great works. That's just one example. And we're hearing inbound requests for people saying, you know, how do we connect our systems into public blockchain systems that are running like Stellar. So I think there will be a lot, and keep your ears out for some news coming out in the next few months.
I guess that is a problem in the crypto sphere, is that a lot of these layer ones can be somewhat siloed. And so building bridges and making it more decentralized would improve the system overall. Daniela, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the conference. That was Daniela Barboza. She's the General Manager of Decentralized Technologies at the Linux Foundation. All right, after the break, we'll be wrapping up our coverage of the Stellar Meridian Conference with Stellar Development Foundation Director Danelle Dixon. Good morning, or should I say cheerio? We are live from Stellar Meridian in London.
It's a big year for us at Stellar. We're marking our 10 years since the network was launched. So transformation is a lot about what's the transformation we've seen over the last 10 years, and what do we hope, what kind of transformation do we want to see from the network, from our builders, from all this like very big global ecosystem who's participating in Stellar in the next 10 years.
World Liberty Financial, a DeFi protocol supported by Donald Trump and his family, will start selling tokens today.
It's a money scam. He can get some of his donors to funnel money into that. It ends up in his pocket, and then he can fund things that he needs to do for himself. I mean, it's a transparent scam, and you should avoid it at all costs.
We're announcing our MoneyGram wallet. So for the first time, we're enabling USDC transfers through the MoneyGram network through a special app.
So we are launching our first crypto wallet. It's a non-custodial wallet that is integrated seamlessly into the Tala app experience. And it is, again, leveraging the Stellar network and their partners.
Welcome back. We are on day 2 of the Stellar Meridian Conference live in London. We've been meeting up with developers, founders, entrepreneurs, 800 attendees at the conference overall. And joining us now to discuss is Stellar Development Foundation Executive Director Danelle Dixon. Danelle, you're the one running the show here. Thanks for joining us.
I wish I were running it. I'm not running it at all. Like, everybody else is doing all the hard work, but it's just been so great to be here. So thanks you guys for also joining us.
Thank you. So tell me some of the highlights for you so far at the conference.
Yeah, I mean, it feels kind of like a whirlwind. It's one of the conference, the Meridian conference is sort of a forcing function for us to kind of pull everything together that we've been working on throughout the year. And so there's lots of announcements in terms, like today we just announced USDL live on Stellar, which is going to be on Stellar by the end of the year, and that's amazing. Like having Paxos' asset there, and we're so excited because of what it also offers to all of the users out there, particularly outside the United States, since it can't be purchased or used there. But also, I was just looking at the clips that were going on beforehand and just thinking about the non-custodial wallet that MoneyGram put out. From my standpoint, like that is a year in the making, because they actually did a pilot last year here at Meridian. And then Tala's wallet, Tala has done such a great job in Peru getting their wallet out there. And I think that they really love it because it gets you into market much faster. And so that was a really cool thing. Stripe has been here to talk about their announcement, MasterCard. It's just really cool to see all of it. But mostly my favorite part is just the developers.
I feel like you and I speak every 8 months or so, or for the last couple of years, and every time there's these giant movements in what Stellar has been doing. You specifically highlighted MoneyGram's wallet, Tala's wallet. We spoke to Decaf and their wallet. Yesterday, you were on stage with Idris talking about the Acuna wallet. And it started to click for me, and I want to get your take on this, that wallet is almost too small a word, right? And that we're all, because there's a lot of wallets being talked about here and really at every conference. But really, wallets are just gateway financial applications that are focused on the regional needs, and then often those regional needs can become global. And I think we have to shift our focus to be like, no, these are just the new fintech companies that are coming out there. And is that the right or wrong take?
Well, it's so interesting because I think about this a lot from the standpoint of my prior life when I was at Mozilla. We had the browser be like the window to the web, right? It was the way to get in, the way that it could actually, it was a window and then it moved to the door where you could actually open it and then you could access everything that was available on the web. And that was such an important innovation to be able to leverage that and to have that be open and available to everyone all over. Wallets are very similar in terms of sort of the opportunity to get to that financial freedom. And it is the doorway and this massive arch into this global awesome system that is the network. And so I do think that they're fintech companies. They're actually financial services providers. The component of that that's slightly different and why it's more like the browser is because it's opening up the world of this decentralized network. So they don't own, control, or have custody of your assets or your keys. And that is such an amazing piece of this because we're still keeping that decentralized nature that's really important to blockchain and the value to the individual. And yet we have these institutions that are going to provide you this easy way in. And so I think that single point of entry is so crucial, and then the users sort of get to do what they want.
As of the second quarter of this year, I saw that total addresses on the Stellar network surpassed 8.4 million, growing by over 400,000 addresses within 1 quarter. Real world asset supply hit almost $800 million. Or rather $600 million at the end of June and has continued to increase. So I'm wondering, where are you seeing the growth on the Stellar network?
Well, so though I love those numbers, but we need them bigger. We need them to be more and more and more. We need to see total value locked on Sorbonne to be $1 billion. We need to see all of these things happen, and we need to see it happen quickly. So I love it, and I love the growth. And we're seeing tons of growth in addresses because we're seeing all these wallets really move on to the network, create opportunity for their users, and then grow the user base really quickly. And so we see AirTM, it's a wallet on Stellar that's grown really quickly over the last year. We see Decaf growing, Vibrant's growing. So when I think about what and Meru, it's a wallet in South America, it's also really growing. So when I think about what's important here, addresses are really crucial because you're seeing that you're touching humans. But when you see the need to have assets that are interesting and available to everyone, that are some of them are going to be permissioned, and that's okay for some populations, but then the permissionless ones are even better. Those are the growth numbers that I want to see too. I want to see Sorbonne get to the billion TVL because it's a vanity number. I'm just going to be super honest. It doesn't really show anything, but you need that. You need it to show that there is so much happening on the network. We don't do the glitz and glamour, but we can do that a little bit with TVL.
Okay. With Sorbonne, it's a smart contract platform. It comes later in the game, which in this sense has advantages, and you're able to design from the experience of other chains, but it's late to the game. So I'm wondering, how are you tracking developers onto the platform? Are you trying to steal them away from other chains or grab them from Web 2?
It's a good question. So I think that probably a little bit of both. I mean, I think that the developers that are going to come to build on Sorbonne are not necessarily the same developers that are going to develop on Ethereum. We're going to get some that there's a crossover, but if you think about what is Stellar purpose-built for? It's purpose-built for payments. It's purpose-built for usage of the assets that are issued there. It's built for everyday financial services. And so when we think about that, that's not necessarily all of the folks that are building on Ethereum. So we're going to grab some from other chains, and we already see that. And they can build on all chains. That's the beauty of it, is that you can actually be able to make that quickly. And because we used languages that are common languages, it made it a lot easier for developers to be able to learn and build there. But also, we're going to grab some from Web 2 too, because you think that that's part of like when you think about like a traditional financial infrastructure, they're still in the Web 2 world. We're going to see some of that come over. A lot of focus on payments, a lot of focus on getting value to the end users and leveraging that value in different ways. So,
I think there's something that we've seen as a trend in our conversations, which is, we had Tala, we had OnAfrique, we had MoneyGram and Stripe. So you have all these companies that are traditional financial services that have been around for quite a while, who are all now exploring utilizing this technology, both as needs for specific regions, but really it sounds like they're starting to think about, is this the future of our company? Which is, I think, a really exciting place to be.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more, like, are we on that cusp where people are starting to understand that the future of money is now fully digital? How that's going to happen is still out there. But are you seeing the larger companies and the entrepreneurs coming together to say, no, we all have to be building in this?
I think that we're really close. I'm not sure we're on the cusp yet, but I think we're really close to it. And the reason why that is there's a few things that sort of still have to happen to move everybody there. And I think I mean, whether we like it or not, the United States and not having regulation there is an issue that we need to sort of get to so that we can actually open that up to more traditional financial infrastructure. But I do think everyone sees it, and all the players want it to happen, and they want to build on it because they see this is another rail that's going to take us to like another spot where we can actually offer services to more users and and create more opportunities. And I think so we're close. We're very close.
In March, I saw the STF announced a $100 million in grants will be offered through the Sorbonne Adoption Fund. So I'm wondering, if I'm a developer, how do I get the grants? Are there certain projects that you're more privy toward, and how much would I get?
Yeah, so the Sorbonne Adoption Fund some of it is actually pushed through the Stellar Community Fund, so the community actually decides, which is awesome. It sort of takes us out of it. They can range from like $10,000 to like $150,000 to $200,000 worth of XLM for those, and so it's great to see that. And then some grants are going to come through more traditional of the business side, and so it's relationships. And we also do RFPs, so requests for proposals, where we say we want to see this thing be built, and so then we'll give grants for that, and that also comes out of there. So I like to say that we're sort of agnostic as to what people are building, unless it's like when we need to see infrastructure, when we need to see different pieces and we want the ecosystem to build instead of us, which is a really big belief of mine. So it's kind of everything.
What kind of projects are popular among the community then?
The community loves wallets. The community loves if you think
a lot of wallets.
Yeah, when you think about like what wallets do, again, they sort of open up the world of Web3 and Stellar to end users. The community also, we have a lot of infrastructure that's really analytics companies and whatnot that have come onto Sorbonne. We just actually announced, I think yesterday, Dune. So when you think about the need for these types of security and infrastructure pieces on Sorbonne, I think that we've created an audit. We have a lot of audit relationships there. And I think that the reason why those are all important, so when you're auditing the code to make sure that that's secure, these are all crucial. And I think that we'll probably have like the most security around like the Sorbonne infrastructure because of these different companies. But everybody kind of likes that because then they feel like, okay, we're approaching this from a very mature standpoint and create an opportunity that way.
So Janelle, when we're sitting here a year from now in some probably undisclosed location.
I wish I knew the answer. I would tell you.
What are we going to be talking about next year?
I think we're going to be talking about over $1 billion TVL on Sorbonne. And maybe I won't talk about it as much because it won't be a thing. Again, vanity metric, but important. And I think we're going to be seeing these wallets that are already, I think, growing and have a ton of traction. I think they're going to be more connected to Sorbonne and offer more of those everyday financial services there. And we're going to see, I think, more assets that are issued on Stellar from the tokenization of real-world assets piece, which I think is crucial, again, to your point about bringing other infrastructure on or other industries on to Stellar. That's a really key way to do it. And I think it opens things up in a different way. So I think we're going to be talking about those things.
Yeah. We didn't get to touch on it with our coverage, but Franklin Templeton, they have mutual funds tracked on the blockchain.
It's not even tracked on the blockchain. It is issued on the blockchain. So this is a really important distinction. Like this is their ledger for Franklin Templeton's money market fund, Benji, and it's amazing that they're able to do what they did and that they did it. They started so early. So they started in 2019. So they filed with the SEC and they started moving forward through that. They're like the first ones that got it out there. They're pretty remarkable in terms of what they're doing, and I think we're going to see more from them. They already are allowing, and they want to be able to have those assets sit sort of outside the Benji wallet a little bit. So these are good things in terms of like the permission. It's permissioned, but they're going to let it float a little bit more outside. So, I mean, I think that that's sort of the future. If you think about yield-bearing assets like USDL, we're going to see a lot of those types of assets be out in the world because it's super valuable to end users to be able to have yield-bearing assets and sort of risk-free yield. And I think that's a really important
And I did see on the agenda real estate blockchain, which many folks have talked about, but have not exactly implemented yet. So
it's an interesting thing because it's complicated, I think, depending on where you sit from a legal standpoint to do that. But Red Swan is an organization that's doing it in a lot of the global south, as well as I think that they actually are doing it even outside those areas. And I'm fascinated to see how this works. But I love the idea of tokenization of real estate because it gives people an opportunity to own a thing that they can point to. And that's pretty awesome because not everybody has that access today.
All right. Well, Danelle, I'm excited for next year.
Thanks
so much for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. After the break, some quick final thoughts before we wrap up our coverage of the Stellar Meridian conference in London.
This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block.
Welcome back. You're watching CoinDesk Live at this Stellar Meridian conference in London. All right, so it's Wednesday morning in London right now. We still have a full day of conferences left, but our coverage is coming to an end. And, we've talked to developers, founders, entrepreneurs. Sam, as we wrap up this coverage, what were some of the highlights for you?
I think for me, there's three themes that seem to emerge that I personally love to hear because I think it's why a lot of us got into crypto in the first place. Yes, there are those who got into get rich. And there's a lot of us that got in because it was a really reimagination of financial systems and a kind of redistribution, if you will, of financial power. And so the three themes that I thought were interesting here is one, just truly the power of stablecoins.
Yes. Hearing it over and over again.
Over and over, and like you got to give a sort of hat tip to MoneyGram, who was mentioned half a dozen times, who just was early in, I think, to recognize that and say people need ways to get money on and off. So that was a big one for me. I think the second is at no other conference that I've been to, not even our own consensus, do you get so excited about the emerging market, right? We talked a lot about the global majority and the importance of such and how much they're asking for these tools, but also how many amazing entrepreneurs are building the tools for them. And I think that was the second one. The third one, I think, was what Danelle just told us, which is an interesting unlock. If you look at the wallet as the browser to this new decentralized world, decentralized network, I think that's like a pretty interesting way to look at this because I think we probably hear, I don't need another wallet, right? And whether it's a MetaMask or Coinbase or whatever, like in the US, we're so focused on, is it custodial, non-custodial, this or that, as opposed to, there are places where they don't have basic systems, right? When we talk to the folks from doing the Transparent Network, it's like they want to build something that just doesn't exist in Ukraine to help Ukraine create more opportunity to just survive as a country, right? And so the ability to say a wallet and they're really not even a wallet, it's about instant payments among banks, that the blockchain really opens up those opportunities in ways that it made me really think, I just don't love the word wallet for that reason, because I think of something old, and I don't think of like as opposed to these
digital
things are.
passport.
Digital passport, gateway, something. But when I think of them as these are just the modern fintech companies, or the modern culture in fintech companies, it makes me much more ambitious about what you can do with it. Okay. What were your highlights of the conversations?
Well, I'll just piggyback off of some of your thoughts there, because I feel like you nailed it on the head. With stable coins, I'm hearing just more and more that this brings it back to core principles in blockchain, digital assets, crypto, whatever you want to call it, Web3. And that we're here for electronic cash payments because it's more efficient. It brings global liquidity. It connects people to financial services, the global majority that we want to see online and able to access credit, able to buy goods, access a bank account easily, efficiently, to able to live their everyday lives. And in the emerging market aspect of it, we see how that humanizes it down to a very basic level. You're a refugee. You're on the move. You don't want to carry wads of cash around. And so someone can email you some cash, some digital currency, and you can access your local currency with that through the MoneyGrams, through local money transfer services. So that just, brings it from the digital to the physical world. And we see that in all these stories here at Stellar Meridian. So just very glad to see that actually make sense in our reality.
Yeah. Thanks everyone who's been watching. We saw there's tens of thousands of you who've tuned in today, so really appreciate that. Thank you to Stellar for bringing us over here to be able to meet all these amazing people. Thank you for being an amazing host.
Thank you, Sam. Awesome work with all the CoinDesk Live team. That wraps up day 2 of our CoinDesk Live coverage of the Stellar Meridian conference. We're looking forward to another day of sessions on the main stage. And folks, check us out on X for social updates at Christine News, and we've got
at Sam Ewan.
All right, signing off from London. I'm Christine Lee with my colleague Sam. Have a great day.
This season, we're trying out something different. It's a new mini-series approach to how we'll bring you conversations and stories about how people are changing their corners of the world block by block. We're going to dive into how to make real-world impact and hear the stories about who benefits when we build solutions that make a difference in the real world. Thanks again for listening, supporting, and subscribing to Block by Block.